Payne,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah, Commissioner Sobieski,
Here.
Commissioner Batalico, Commissioner John Grave, Commissioner Fox.
Here.
Will be sitting Commissioner Fox for Commissioner Minor. He's been sitting in for him. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I have one item that we're going to be discussing is that Alumni Road. I think there was a meeting under, we'll do it under Commissioner remarks. Maybe you have some updated information on that?
On Alumni?
On Alumni Road?
I don't have anything new, but I can share what I do have.
Okay.
Yep. Under Commissioner's comments, you said?
Yeah,
we'll do
please.
that? Okay.
Anyone have okay with that, discussing the Alumni Road? I think there's some information that maybe Dominic has or Stanley might have on, I guess the DOT had met with, there's some information out. So we'll discuss it under Commissioner remarks.
So the first Commissioner remarks or the second?
The first one.
Okay.
And then we're also under public participation. We have the chairman of the Inland Wetlands Commission here, and we're going to allow him to speak under public participation. He has some items to bring up, and we want to get him in early on the meeting. So the first item, well, not the first item, but public participation. I'd like to have Chairman Zelik come forward and present some information that he has, and we'll discuss what he wants to go over.
Sure. Good evening. Jeffrey Zelik, 55 Wells Drive North, Newington, Connecticut. I am the chairman of the Town of Newington Conservation Commission and the Inland Wetlands Commission. I was invited by Vice Chairman Dominic Payne to speak to you tonight regarding the recent removal of TPZ Regulation 4.4.6 and the mutual concerns we have over the removal of the 50-foot setback between a primary structure and the inland wetlands within the Town of Newington. As an invited guest, I would like to request that the time limitation for speakers be waived so that I may fully address these concerns.
Yeah, will allow you to
Thank you, Mr.
vet the
Chairman.
whole thing.
On the evening of September 18th, I was contacted by TPZ Vice Chairman Payne, who had read the meeting minutes from the August Conservation Commission meeting at which the Conservation Commission members expressed much alarm and concern over the removal of TPZ Regulation 4.4.6. In speaking with Vice Chairman Payne, I learned that TPZ members may have been under the impression that the town planner was in close contact with the Conservation Commission and was actively engaged in keeping the Conservation Commission abreast of matters. Unfortunately, the Conservation Commission, which is directly impacted by the removal of Regulation 4.4.6, was never contacted or consulted regarding this matter. Neither the Conservation Commission, its chairman, its members, nor its staff, which include the inland wetland agent, who is appointed by the town manager, were ever contacted. The Town of Newington Inland Wetland Agent learned of the removal of Regulation 4.4.6 via a memo received on July 21st from the town planner. Nearly a full month had passed since the regulation was officially removed on June 30th. This memo from the town planner was presented to the Conservation Commission at its August 2017 meeting. The town planner was asked to attend to speak to this matter, but did not show up for the meeting. He instead sent a memo explaining the reasons behind the regulation's removal. The commission expressed much concern that a disservice to the town of Newington had been done by the removal of TPZ Regulation 4.4.6. The inland wetland agent was directed by the Conservation Commission chairman to again request the town planner attend the September Conservation Commission meeting, but the town planner declined the invitation, stating the protocol required for the request must go through the town manager. The town manager has directed the town planner to accommodate this request, and the town planner has finally committed to attending the October 2017 Conservation Commission meeting. To frame this for you, the regulation was removed June 30th. However, it will not be until the October meeting before the Conservation Commission can discuss this with the town planner. I will now outline the concerns raised by the Conservation Commission. Number one, no communication between the town planner and the Conservation Commission or the inland wetland agent. The town planner explained in his memo to the Conservation Commission that no communication was required as a public hearing was held. The Conservation Commission feels this reason is unacceptable, as a public hearing is intended to give the public the opportunity to speak. Government bodies such as our two commissions, with their appointed members, do not speak to each other through public hearings. Government bodies are expected to communicate directly with each other and seek comments from each other regarding matters which may impact one another's business. The town planner sits just steps away from the office of the Town of Newington Inland Wetland Agent. For a town planner not to communicate such issues with the town staff members is completely unacceptable. Second item of concern, the town planner cited legal reasons for the removal of Regulation 4.4.6. Neither the town attorney nor the TPZ and its members are in copy for this memo to the Conservation Commission. As Conservation Commissioners astutely pointed out, the same legal reasons given by the town planner could be applied to any TPZ regulation and not just the 50-foot setback from wetlands. Item number 3 of concern. Conservation Commission is concerned that due process for the removal of a regulation may have been denied to the Conservation Commission, as the Conservation Commission was never informed about the change, which will directly impact their responsibilities. Concern number 4. The town planner may have given the TPZ the impression that the TPZ and the Conservation Commission regulations were redundant and 4.4.6 was not needed, as the Conservation Commission has regulations in place for setbacks. I can assure you there are no inland wetland regulations regarding building setbacks. The Conservation Commission does not regulate buildings. The Conservation Commission's primary concerns are with soil disturbances and other regulated activities within the upland review area or wetlands that may have significant impact on the wetlands. The Conservation Commission must show cause for denial, and that can be a costly and time-consuming process as expert testimony is required. Without Regulation 4.4.6 in place, a primary structure can now be built right up to the wetland boundaries. The Conservation Commission is ill-prepared to regulate structures. That function lies squarely with the TPZ. Item number 5 of concern. Removal of Regulation 4.4.6 possibly and most likely means more applications coming before the Conservation Commission, which is already burdened with a significant workload. More residents and businesses will be impacted if their buildings are now allowed within the upland review area or near a wetland. All activities within the upland review area require a lengthy application to be filed and includes a review process which could last months. Newington is already viewed as not being business-friendly. More applications before the Conservation Commission increase the risk of denial, which we all know could lead to legal actions which the town must finance to defend itself. Regulation 4.4.6 was a buffer that possibly prevented numerous legal challenges to the town of Newington. Concern number 6. The TPZ record regarding discussion of Regulation 4.4.6, I have been told that by one Conservation Commission member who regularly attends these TPZ meetings and by one town councilor who researched the TPZ records, that there seems to be little recorded as to why the TPZ approved the removal of Regulation 4.4.6. These individuals hope to find a discussion regarding why 4.4.6 was originally adopted by the town and to uncover the reason why the TPZ removed it. The concern is the regulation was removed without being specifically addressed. In closing, I would like to applaud Vice Chairman Payne for taking the time to read the August Conservation Commission meeting minutes and for researching and reaching out to me so that we could carry forward to you the concerns raised by the Conservation Commission regarding Regulation 4.4.6's removal. On behalf of the Conservation Commission, I urge you to reinstate Regulation 4.4.6 as quickly as possible. I hope to see this item on your next agenda and will avail myself to you regarding any of the concerns raised here tonight. I thank you for your time.
We have a copy of that communication.
It'll be in the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to allow the planner to talk about the why we took it out.
Yes, all right. Yes, first I'll speak about why it was taken out, and then I'll speak to the issue of coordination with the Conservation Commission. Several years ago, there was a Connecticut Supreme Court decision which ruled that zoning regulations cannot contain any language that talks about waivers, buffers, modifications, et cetera, because those are all just different words for variance. And the only board in any town that can grant variances is the Zoning Board of Appeals. Only they can grant variances. So the judge was pretty clear. He said that towns can try to call it different things in their zoning regulations, but a variance is a variance, and only the ZBA can grant variances. So the ruling was that basically all towns then, at their in a appropriately timely manner, would need to revise all of their regulations to deal with this issue of not being able to grant waivers. And the Newington Planning and Zoning Commission took the steps to modify one of the waiver regulations that we had, the one that dealt with auto-related uses, but didn't right away tackle the other ones, of which there were some 30 or the word waiver, modify, amend shows up in our zoning regs some 30 or 40 places. So there were quite a few regulations that were affected by this Supreme Court decision. But then there was another decision that came out, I don't know, maybe a year later, which kind of softened that. There was another decision actually involving one of the same judges. And that court decision was that, yes, zoning regulations can give the zoning commission some ability to modify on a case-by-case basis the regulation, but only if there are certain criteria, such as there has to be a purpose statement, there have to be goals, there have to be conditions that an applicant for a waiver would have to meet certain specific standards for that particular kind of waiver. So the Planning Zoning Commission then directed me to then go through the regulations and find all the regs that contain waiver language and make recommendations. So I did that. And it turned out a lot of the regulations, well, not a lot, some of the regulations that contain waivers are not necessary for other reasons, and I'll come back to that later on. But some of the regulations did have some of the waiver regulations did have a good purpose, and they made sense. So the commission spent a fair amount of time modifying the regulations that, before they were fixed, kind of gave blanket waiver authority to the town, which the town doesn't have. So those are all fixed. And during the process of that, one of the regulations that we looked at was this 4.4.6. Now, my recommendation to the commission in the case of 4.4.6 was, because I couldn't think of any criteria to use in deciding which houses should be able to get a waiver and which ones shouldn't, which is one of the things you need to do. You need to have criteria in your waiver regulations. I couldn't come up with a criteria to use, because any applicant that comes before you under 4.4.6 already has to have a wetlands permit. That's a given. They have to have already been approved by the Wetlands Commission. They can't even come before you without an actual wetlands permit in hand. So once they've done that, once they've been vetted by the experts in development within the upland review area, once they've got their permit from the Conservation Commission, what basis would this board, who are not wetlands experts, use to decide who the winners and losers would be? Once they had their wetlands permit, that should be the end of it. Under Connecticut law, it's the Wetlands Commission that makes decisions as to what's allowed within the upland review area and wetlands, not any other land use board. So they're the experts. So at that point, there's no need to go further. And in fact, like I said, I couldn't even think of any way for this commission to decide between one house that got the permit, another house that got the permit. Who do we give the waiver to? Who do we don't? There was no way to come up with a transparent process. So, and that's what I explained to the commission that night. And I think Commissioner Sobieski had some questions about a different aspect of this situation. But the commission, apparently, because there was no dissent, agreed with the explanation that I laid out. And so then we went on to the next item. Now, the comment that was made about how something about the same reason could apply to any regulation. Well, yes, exactly. The same rationale did apply to some 20 or 30 regulations, and those were the ones that we went back and looked at, and those are the ones we changed or eliminated as appropriate to comply with the state Superior Court decision that any waiver regulation has to have a purpose statement and has to have specific criteria. So that was the reason behind my recommendation to delete 4.4.6. Now, as to why I didn't coordinate more closely with the Conservation Commission, there was a reason why I didn't. In hindsight, I wish I had. It would have made life a lot simpler for everybody. So I apologize for not having coordinated with them. But the reason I didn't was because this does not affect the Conservation Commission. 4.4.6 required an applicant to get a wetlands permit. They had to get a wetlands permit before they could even come to you for a waiver. So your actions take place after the Conservation Commission. Their role in the waiver in 4.4.6, their role takes place before yours. So deleting 4.4.6 does nothing to their authority. They've always had the authority in whether to allow a house within 50 feet of a wetland or not. And they still do. They always have, they always will have that authority. Taking this regulation off the books made it possible now for someone not to have to come to you for a waiver once they've gotten their wetlands permit. They will no longer have to come to you for, I'll call it a rubber stamp, of what they've already gotten a permit for from the experts in what development should be allowed near a wetland and what shouldn't. So again, I apologize for not coordinating better with the Conservation Commission, but that's why I didn't, because as I just said, this deletion of 4.4.6 does not affect the Conservation Commission.
Okay, he brought up the fact that, well, I'm not sure of the facts as far as the regulations from the Wetlands Commission. You want to come back up, Mr. Zeller? Try to explain to us why you feel that we have to take action because you don't have enough authority under your regulations to.
Once again, the Inland Wetland Commission does not determine what gets built where on a site. That's all up to the TPZ. We only evaluate impact to the wetlands. So again, you now can place a house, a building, structure, primary structure, right up to the inland wetland border. I don't think that's something that you want to do given the recent events that occurred in Houston. The TPZ in that city is under much scrutiny at this time because of their lax building codes. Okay? I'm going to give you that as one significant reason. Public safety is your responsibility. It's one of your primary tenets in your regulations. I think if you look at your regulations right up front, public safety is listed as something of concern to you. Again, placement of a structure that close to a wetland is your responsibility, not the inland wetlands. We don't regulate building. We only assess impact to the wetlands. Now, as far as it not impacting us, as I explained, we expect that there will be more applications coming to the Inland Wetland Commission because of this. If you now allow buildings within the 50-foot upland review area, we most certainly will have to review more applications. Applications cost money, they take time, they take resources.
Okay, so.
And again, I would like the commission to go back and understand why was regulation 4.4.6 originally put into your regulations? What was the thought behind that? And does the removal of 4.4.6 fall in line with the 2020 plan for the town of Newington, as we have open space preservation as a primary objective in the 2020 plan?
Mr. Planner.
It's true what Chairman Zellick says when he says that the Conservation Commission regulates impacts. However, as a practical matter, any house that wants to get built within 50 feet of a wetlands has to get a permit from the Conservation Commission. Is that not correct, Mr. Zellick?
Mr. Chairman, rather than doing a Q&A on this, I'm asking you, as I did my closing statement, to place this on your agenda so that it can be open for discussion as a regular agenda item. Again, the Conservation Commission is urging you to reinstate Regulation 4.4.6.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zeller.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm opening up for commission comments. Go ahead, Dominic.
Yeah. I don't want to get into it, but I was, when we were at the meeting there, it seemed like this was okay with the wetlands. I got that impression from you, and maybe I got the wrong impression from you. I'd like to have an opportunity to reread the minutes. I'd like to have this back on our agenda so that we can have a nice discussion about it. And if needed, and we need additional information, we may have to request more information from wetlands if needed at the time. But I think it should definitely go back on our agenda for discussion, and then possibly putting it back up after the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Sobieski.
Yes, I kind of agree with Commissioner Zelik a little bit about the flooding. Houston is one of the classic areas where they've allowed building right up almost close to the water, or well within the floodplain. It's happening somewheres in Newington here where some of this has encroached already. I really think we need to look at 4.4.46, but I also think that there needs to be more enforcement of filling in of wetlands. There seems to be an awful lot done on the weekends in this town. I know there's a spot up on Day Street that was getting filled in with millings, and I know the town, I believe Mike D'Amato's been up there for a couple times. Thank you.
Claffey.
I have, I don't think we need to really go and look at what's happening outside our state, because we have areas in this state, we're on the coast, and we have buildings that are built to the building code that can ascertain the flooding in storms. I personally know of homes, my mom lives in one that you literally walk outside and you can be at high tide, you can have water in your backyard. So I don't know how we're bringing the building code into this when their building code and zoning code are pretty much mutually exclusive. Our zoning code doesn't say how to build a house in a wetlands or a water area. We deal with zoning. I don't know how you can bring those to try to fight a case here. That's all I have to say.
Michael, any comments?
I want to wait and see what we have on the minutes, and we'll talk about it again. No, this is, didn't we pass something in June 20th of 17, the regs for 4.4.6?
I
don't know what the date was.
We did a whole, we
found a
went through,
PDF on that.
All of them, right?
we went through,
Everything.
because of the court case, I'll give you the back, because of the court case, we went through our regulations. We found in the regulations that we put into, or what was written in the regulations said that we had the authority to waive certain things. In the court case, the judge said that we don't. Is that pretty much what the case said?
Right.
Okay.
As of,
So we went through and we instructed the planner to go through and find all the instances where we had arbitrary, could wholesalely
Right.
give a waiver. A good example, I'm going to give you an example, is when the applicant came in for the gateway piece on the Berlin Turnpike, which was where,
Yep.
you know which piece I'm talking about, the
Yeah,
one
which
on
is
the
now
corner
Starbucks,
of,
Fidel,
what street is that?
not Denning,
Raleigh.
Rowley Street and the
Rowley
Berlin
Street, yeah.
Turnpike. It's the gateway site
Yep.
where the old Italian kitchen was and the strip club was, that they knocked down and they put in a commercial area. Well, what they asked for was a reduction in the front yard setback. We have a 35-foot setback on the Berlin Turnpike. And with the two-third vote of the commission, you could, the way the regulation said, you could reduce that setback, but it gave a percentage that you could reduce it. This commission, I was on it at the time, said that went along with the waiver and took a two-third vote and allowed them to eliminate the whole 35-foot setback except for 5 feet. So, which was beyond what the regulation even allowed them to do. At that time, I objected. I voted against the project because of that one thing. So there's an example of wholesalely taking the regulation, and that's what we were trying to not do with the regulations by having us change the way that we did business and wholesalely take things out of or waive things that we didn't have the authority to waive. In this instance, you could even say that this could go to ZBA. Is that correct?
What could go to ZBA?
The instance where someone wanted to come and build up to the line of the wetlands.
Well, back when 4.4.6 was in effect, yes, someone could come to you. Well, no, because if you denied them the waiver, then their only recourse would be to go to the courts. They couldn't appeal your decision to the ZBA. They'd have to go to the courts.
This was designed basically to keep buildings 50 feet away from the wetlands, because it says, no principal building shall be placed or constructed within 50 feet of the regulated inland wetlands. So basically, stay 50 feet away. So why do we even need a waiver for that? Why can't we just go with the same, that one principle? No buildings are going to be 50 feet within the wetlands. Pure and simple as that.
You could do that. You could do that.
Okay.
I think we need it on the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is that that consensus of the commission?
Again, too.
Okay. Would you put it on the agenda for the next meeting? And,
As a new business item?
as a new business item?
Certainly.
And make sure that the Conservation Commission is alerted to, or at least sent the notice of, and Mr. Zelik, would you please try to make that meeting so you could help us with this? I mean, a simple solution would be to reinstate it the way, with some modifications. I was under the impression that you had things in your regulation that would not allow people to build within.
Oh, they do. They do. I don't want to leave it. I respect Mr. Zelig's desire not to get into back and forth, but I don't want to leave you with the impression that what he said was correct. The Wetlands Commission has total control over anything within 50 feet of a wetland.
And there's nothing wrong with having it in both places, though.
Except for it makes people come to you for a rubber stamp, which delays the approval process. Because once they've gotten their permit from wetlands, in any other town, they're good to go. And
Yeah, but if we have it in our regulations that says you can't put it within 50 feet, then it can't go within 50 feet.
oh, you mean your other suggestion? Well, we can talk about that. Yeah.
The waiver portion, I would not want to consider that, given this commission the ability to waive, because that goes against the court case, and we put ourselves in jeopardy of a suit based on that court case. So that was my understanding why I said to proceed with and take the changes, make the changes that we made in the whole regulation, not specifically this particular item, but all the areas where we arbitrarily were granting waivers where we didn't have the authority to do so. Okay, we're all set.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the other item under, okay.
Procedures.
I'm going to go open this up for public participation. Anyone from the public wishing to speak at this time, come forward, state your name and address for the record. Anyone want to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, remarks by commissioners. We want to, under this portion of the thing, we want to talk about I'd like an update on the Alumni Road. We're hearing things coming back from the DOT. Maybe you have some information that you could share with the
okay, I'll
commission.
try off the top of my head. I wasn't prepared to talk about this, so I wasn't able to refresh my notes and my memory. But yes, there was a meeting at DOT several weeks ago, which was the result of the plan that started actually with TPZ. So there was a meeting at DOT at their request several weeks ago. And the plan was discussed by DOT staff with the town staff. There was the mayor, the town manager was there, I was there, economic development director was there. The engineering consulting firm, CDM Smith, had a representative there, and several members from DOT, and they expressed their concerns with the town's proposal. They expressed their concerns with putting a traffic light at Old Farm East because they felt that a light at Old Farm East wasn't warranted for various technical reasons that DOT uses when they determine whether a light is warranted or not. They felt that a sidewalk on the south side of Cedar Street could possibly require taking of homes, which they certainly didn't want to do. Nobody wants to do, but they felt that might be an outcome. And they had a few other suggestions. I think basically their philosophy was, why don't we all just go back to the original plan?
Which was what?
To put a traffic light at Alumni. No, I'm sorry, not the original plan. Again, I wish I'd had a chance to refresh my notes.
But it was a taking of a couple of houses.
Yes.
And I don't know about Stanley, but that's far from what I
That's
wanted.
not what we,
Totally unacceptable to take any houses
Right.
or property, so.
Right. And that was pretty much the town's response to at that meeting. So where we left it was the town was going to fall back and regroup, polish up the plan that we'd proposed, maybe come back with a revised plan that addressed some of the suggestions that DOT had at that meeting. And we're in that process. We're in the process of reopening the contract with CDM Smith because our contract with them was done. Their job was just to put together the plan to submit to DOT, which was done. So now we're in the process of reopening that contract to get them back here to help us put together another plan or a revised plan to keep the process moving.
Thank you.
They had objections to closing of Maple Hill Avenue at the end?
No, I don't remember that. I don't remember them having any objection to that per se.
Would be the purpose of taking of houses.
Oh, to put a sidewalk on the south side of Cedar between Maple and
I think it was to exit from
Vincent.
Vincent. Right.
from Vincent. They were going to take a couple of houses there so they could
Right,
make a
from
little
Vincent
road from
east.
Vincent to, or not from Vincent, but
Saddle
cross-
Hill into
Alumni.
Alumni,
Well,
right.
no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about DOT was concerned that if we, the royal we, wanted to put a sidewalk on the south side of Cedar between Vincent and Old Farm East, that would possibly require taking one of the homes on the south side of Cedar Street because they're relatively close to Cedar. That's what I'm talking about, on the south side of Cedar Street.
Weren't they also wanted to go into Alumni Road?
They didn't say that that's what they want. I'm not sure what you mean by what they want.
Well, they didn't. Did they want to build the road behind the houses on Maple Hill or not?
Well, I'm sorry, you're using the word want.
Well,
did they have any
suggest-
objection to that? No, they didn't express any objection to that aspect of the plan.
So we're getting hung up because of a sidewalk? I mean, we
That doesn't
eliminate the
make sense.
sidewalk if because we're not going to take any homes. I mean, the solution is just to eliminate the sidewalk, if that's what it takes to move the project forward. I mean, we're going to scrap this project because of,
Well, no, we're not going to scrap it. We're going to get CDM back here and continue working on the plan to make it into a form that's acceptable to everybody.
Since
I
we caught,
have a question.
go ahead, Stan.
Which house were they saying, a house on the south side of Cedar Street they wanted to take?
No, they don't want to take anything.
No, what are they
Well,
suggesting?
I think words are extremely important, and I don't want to use words like they want to take houses.
Yes.
Not even suggest. No. The issue is, if a sidewalk was to be put on the south side of Cedar Street, that to create enough land to put a sidewalk there,
You'd have to take houses.
that doesn't make sense.
Well,
Maybe you
side
could,
of
maybe
Cedar?
since we caught you off guard, you could have a better report for us at our next meeting.
absolutely.
Thank you.
okay.
Man, usually it's me causing the ruckus.
The next item on the agenda is the public portion of the meeting, which is the public hearing portion. We'll have the vice chairman read the procedures which we follow for a public hearing, and we have 3 public hearings that we're going to conduct tonight.
Procedures for public hearing. The order of proceedings at a public hearing shall be as followed. A, convening by the chairman. B, reading of the notice by the commission secretary or the commissioner designated by the chairman to act in his stead. C, identification and location of the property involved by the town planner. D, a statement of the issue to be considered by the chairman or the town planner. E, presentation by applicant limited to 20 minutes unless a specific extension is granted by the chair. F, persons wishing to speak in favor of the application limited 2 minutes per person. G, persons wishing to speak in opposition to the application limited 3 minutes per person. H, rebuttal by the applicant limited to 5 minutes total. I, rebuttal by the opposition, limited to 5 minutes total. During the public hearing, it shall be within the discretion of the chairman whether the time limitation should be varied slightly, provided the commission consents to any such variance. In no case shall an extension be for more than 20% of the allotment indicated above or 1 minute, whichever is greater.
Could you please read petition 3117, special permit?
Petition 31-17, special permit, section 3.2.1, church residence at 800 North Mountain Road, St. Thomas Indian Orthodox Church. Owner applicant Reverend Frank Abram Phillip. Father Abram Phillip, 800 North Mountain Road, Newington, Connecticut. Contact.
Is the applicant here? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and present your application.
Respected Commissioners, my name is Binu Chandy and I live at 21 Max Felix Drive in Mansfield.
You get the name, Mr. Planner?
Yes.
I would like to disclose that I serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission for the town of Mansfield, and I'm in no way representing my town today on this request. I'm a member of the St. Thomas Indian Orthodox Church and am officially representing its vicar and president, Reverend Father Abraham Phillip, the applicant, who couldn't be present today. He resides in New York, but we do have a statement from him that our secretary, Mr. Nelson, will be reading out at the end of my presentation. I would like to note that I'm accompanied by various other officials from the church. I have prepared a presentation for you today. Mr. Minor, is the presentation on? Yeah.
It's up there now.
Do you want me to scroll through them?
The presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by, you
I
mean the...
sent you the presentation. I have a hard drive.
Oh, the written, the 2-page,
So the PowerPoint that I sent to you.
yes, you did. Hang on.
Sorry.
No, we're still getting used to this new system here.
I have it on this.
If you have it on a thumb drive, that would be quicker than for me to go off the server and log on.
Oh, this is the one they want to put the little balloon for. How does that affect her?
Okay. Do you wanna, does this look, I hope this looks familiar. Do you want to sit here?
Okay, my bad. I put it in the wrong place.
You could sit in that chair and, because of, yeah, and then you could run the computer.
Okay, thank you.
So that he could, the planner can make sure that we get it all on the record.
Okay, thank you. So our church is located, is this the mic? Okay. Our church is located at 800 North Mountain Road. For those of you who don't know, it's the previous Hartford Liederkranz building. It's zoned industrial. It's about 1 acre. And the adjacent properties are mostly small industrial buildings and businesses. Currently, we are operating it as a church, and we got the special permit granted by our esteemed commission. on November 12, 2015. So as mentioned in Mr. Minor's memo, we are applying for a special permit via Section 3.2.1 of the zoning regulations for a building expansion to include a residential quarter / accessory space for the vicar's use. It's 1 bedroom and full bath. So the expansion will be in the southeast corner. It's about 225 square feet. This is a conceptual plan. So it's basically a 1 bedroom space and a bathroom. So this is the language in section 3.2.1. And it says places of worship, when approved by special permit, are permitted to have a residential quarter for a family. The area of such quarters not to exceed 2,000 square feet. All such uses must be included within a building or be accessory to the permitted principal use. So we are consistent with section 3.2.1. Our proposed expansion is 225 square feet, about 1/8 of that which is permitted. And the expansion is within the building, so it's consistent with the regulations. As per Mr. Minor's memo and section 5.2.6, we are required to address the following special criteria: the need for proposed use, the existing and future character of neighborhood, interrelation between the various structures on the property, the traffic impacts, impacts on water, sewer, and storm drains, impacts on signs, lighting and landscape, and the buffer to adjacent properties. So I'm going through the list one by one. The need for the proposed use. Our priest travels from New York on Saturday mornings to conduct services and visit parishioners' homes. So he has been hosted by various member families for the weekend and also on weekdays on special feast days, and this has proved inconvenient on both sides. So providing a decent and comfortable hotel accommodation on a long-term basis is not a feasible option, both financially as well as practically. Therefore, we have realized the need for a limited lodging space to serve the needs of our priests and the parish. So the next criteria is the existing and future character of neighborhood. Currently, the existing land uses include small industries, businesses, clubs, churches, religious buildings, and some offices. And the future land use character, due to the proposed project, will remain the same. There's not going to be any change. Now, regarding impact on the visual character, here is what the building looks like when you drive westwards on North Mountain Road. You can, the space where we are going to have the proposed expansion is towards the parking lot. And this is what it would look like after the proposed expansion. There'll be a little protruding jog in the southeast corner. And this is something that the eye will not catch while driving, and it's not going to be a significant change. Here's another view from the parking lot to show where the planned expansion is. Next criteria is the interrelation between various structures on the property. There's only one building on the property, so this criteria is not relevant. And the proposed expansion is attached to the current building. About traffic impacts, there will be no traffic impacts. No additional traffic is generated because of this project. There will be no traffic circulation impacts as well. There will be no loss, or maybe there will be a minor loss. We are expecting maybe a loss of 2 parking spaces. Currently, we have 75 parking spaces, and on most Sundays, we need only about 20 to 30 parking spaces. Certain festival days, we need up to maybe maximum of 50 parking spaces. As such, there's surplus parking on the property for the proposed use. Impact on water, sewer, and storm drains. Now, the original building, Hartford Liederkranz, was designed to accommodate about 250 people at any time. Currently, we have an attendance of 60 to 80 people on Sundays. Addition of this space will not trigger any significant additional water or sewer use. At any given time, the load will not be more than current or past use. Now, the proposed expansion will lead to an increase of impervious area by 225 square feet. This is not a significant increase to impact the stormwater system. So the current square foot of the building is about 4,000, maybe a little more than 4,000 square feet. So this is about just a 5% increase. The proposed use will therefore not overload the water, sewer, and storm drain systems. Impact on signs, lighting, and landscape. We are not proposing any additional signs at this time. And the proposed expansion will not affect any existing signage. And the expansion is towards the rear corner of the property. No additional external lighting is also being proposed. So it's not going to cause light pollution on adjacent properties. There will be some minor impact to the current landscape. We may lose 2 bushes that we plan to replace at some point. And this is a photograph of the 2 bushes. This is where the proposed expansion is going to take place. Now, sufficient buffer to adjacent properties. As you can see in this plan, the red square is where the expansion will be. And this hugs the building, and it is at sufficient distance from neighboring properties, so that's not going to be an issue. Anyway, this is not one of the criteria that we need to identify, but I also looked at impact on easements. We have 4 easements. One easement is to the Southern New England Telephone Company, and this is on the northern border of the property.
Second, we're going to change the tape. Go ahead.
So the easement to the Southern New England Telephone Company is on the northern border of the property, and that's not, this proposed project is not going to affect that. Same on the westerly border. There are 2 easements. One easement is to 416 Hartford Avenue, and the second easement is to the Connecticut Natural Gas Corporation. And this proposed project is to the east of the property, so it's not going to affect. And the 4th easement is to the state of Connecticut, the Department of Transportation. And this is the drawing of the easement, and the red square is the proposed project. And it's still a couple of feet, maybe a little more than a couple of feet from the edge of the easement. And anyway, before we get any building permits or before we start construction, we have to contact Call Before You Dig. So we are legally, required to satisfy this requirement. So it's not going to impact that easement as well. So that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm glad to.
Any questions from the
Answer them.
commissioners?
When you were here the first time, the easement on the west side, you had some trees to remove, and all that was done?
Yeah,
Okay, and it's all cleaned up?
it's all cleared up. Yeah.
Any other commissioner remarks? Commissioner Sobieski?
Yeah, on your plan here, you show a dotted line that's going around and almost underneath of the proposed addition. What's that dotted line?
That's just, what do I say, the boundary of the
I think it was on.
curb is not the right, the curb, the end of the parking lot. Yeah, the end of the parking lot.
Curb line.
Yeah, curb line.
What? Okay.
Yeah,
It wasn't delineated here, that's why I was asking. Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, I'll open it up to the public. Anyone here wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Chairman, we have a statement from our vicar. Should
You
we
will be
read
able
it
to
now?
read that at this point.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nishad Nelson. I'm the secretary of the St. Thomas Indian Orthodox Church in Newington. I have a letter here from our priest, Reverend Father Abraham Phillip. I just wanted to read it on his behalf. Honorable members of the commission and our Newington town members present here, a very good evening to you all. My name is Father Abraham Phillip. I'm serving as a parish priest at the St. Thomas Indian Orthodox Church of Newington, Connecticut, and this letter is being read to you on my behalf. Let me begin with a word of thanks directed at this town, its people, and especially the Commission for allowing us to worship at our church in the spirit of freedom and expression guaranteed to us by our constitutional principles. We are indebted to you for making room for us and for allowing us to continue in our growth with all of you towards a more blessed tomorrow. I have been fortunate to serve this parish comprising of various families from the town of Newington as well as its neighboring townships since June 2015. From the very beginning, I have felt an immense sense of joy and a great sense of honor in being able to serve this community. However, being a resident of Queens, New York, and having a commute of 2.5 hours on a good day to reach Newington, my service to the church has often been hindered by my often unpredictable and physically tolling commute. To grant some relief to this plight, my parishioners have graciously opened up their homes to host me every weekend as well as on the various special weekdays it requires me to make this journey. Going forward, however, this is not just sustainable. There have been days that I have forced myself to drive back very late at night so as to not burden my people any more than they already are. The current situation also makes me think twice before making a trip to Newington on a weekday for any pastoral concern, like visiting a family or somebody who is ill, which might be a necessity, but it is not, an emergency per se. A room attached to the church, dedicated to the priest's needs, would be a great relief to the priest, as it will not only ease the inconvenience of the parishioners, but also free up my ability to serve the people of this parish more effectively. I can focus on the more important concerns and not worry about whether or not I'm inconveniencing anyone. I hope you will consider the merits of our application and rule in our favor. Thank you for your time and your service. Sincerely, Reverend Father Abraham Bell.
Anyone else? You want that letter, Mr.
It
Chair?
would make it easier for the secretary. Actually, if you could email it to me, would that be possible? That would be even easier for the secretary. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Rosias, 46 Elton Drive. This project doesn't impact me at all, but I would hope that you would grant the request. This is probably one of the best presentations that I've seen presented at this committee or at this commission in many, many years. Being a member of the public who comes to a lot of the meetings, what we were watching on the screen, we could read. We could understand what you were trying to get across to us, and I appreciate that. I realize it's not a big project like some of the other ones, but if we could only see this and other applications that come forward, it would certainly be appreciated by the public. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this application?
Shibu Cherian, 108 Kimberley Road, Newington. I am the member of St. Thomas Indian Orthodox Church in Newington. I am in favor of this project. Actually, a priest comes live like previous events in my house and surrounding houses. And if we grant this project, it will be helpful for our parish and priest.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? I see other members from the parish that were here for the original application. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will,
Against it.
huh? Yeah, I'm doing that. Time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Frank Capalbo, by the way. Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Capalbo, and I'm a partner with my brother at 416 Hartford Avenue. It's known as CNC Automotive. And our property is back-to-back to the club. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with that. Mainly, I am against that very strongly. And the reason I say that, because a year and a half ago when they came here, they just were going to put a church in it. Now they're going to put an addition. What I am afraid of with this organization, that within the future, will they come up here with some other reason, where there's going to be some kind of a school, or perhaps they're going to ask you to put a second floor in addition. So all the members of the church, they're going to sleep upstairs. I think strongly you should consider not to, because this is an industrial zoning. It's not a residential zoning. So therefore, if I'm sure you guys are all smart guys, okay? But if you allow this person, this organization to do this, eventually somebody else is going to come up with the same idea, and then I don't think you can stop it. Because if you give it one person the right to do so, I don't think you're going to be able to deny it to another. Therefore, strongly opposed to this application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else in opposition? Okay, seeing none, I will allow the applicant to rebut the objections of the...
We have come forward with just this request for an accessory space, which is allowed by Section 3.2.1. If ever we come forward with a request for a residential building, first of all, it's not allowed. And secondly, if we come forward, you always have the opportunity to deny it.
Okay. Do what it did. I have to allow the other one. You could respond to that if you wish, Frank.
I'm sorry, but
You could respond to what she said as a rebuttal.
I know my English isn't nice. Well, they're hers, but I have a hard time understanding her. So if she
I can repeat it for you.
Go
yes,
ahead.
please.
So as per Section 3.2.1, places of worship, when approved by special permit, are permitted to have a residential quarter for a family, just one family. The area of such quarters not to exceed 2,000 square feet. All such uses must be included within a building or be accessory to the permitted principal use. So it has to be related to the activity of the church. If I want to have a boarding school there, or just a residential which doesn't have anything to do with the church, it's not allowed in this town, even with a special permit in that space. So it's never going to happen. You do not have to be afraid of that.
Why didn't you apply at the same time you applied to change from industrial to a church?
At that point, sir, we never had this idea in mind. We only wanted to buy that property to have our church. We didn't think about the priest's quarters. He was still, we were still hosting him. And now it's becoming more and more of a burden for him and for us. A few months ago, he met with an accident. He had not a bad accident, but he rear-ended another car. And that's when, and that affects his, his worship and his concentration in the service. And that's why it's not a very easy project for us. It's an expensive project. And it's not easy for us, Mr. Kapalbo. It's a big undertaking for us. It's an expensive undertaking, but it's because this need is so extreme, and we are seeing it. Our vicar is getting so tired, and it's taking a toll on his physical health. And so we really want to,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm gone.
So there's no way that we can come up with an idea for a school or for residences. If we really wanted it, we would have come with 2,000 square feet. We didn't come with 2,000 square feet. We came with a humble 225 square feet.
Well, I don't believe what you said, because you knew before you applied for a church permit.
We didn't know, sir. We didn't know.
Okay, we're not going to get into a debate here. You made your rebuttal. You had an opportunity to rebut it, and you're not going to get into a debate.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean
It's
that.
not a
to,
pro-
but
it's not-
she knew that the priest was from New York. When the paperwork is show, when they applied for the church, that he was from New York. So don't try to cover my eyes, because I am the wrong guy to do that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'll open it up to the commission. Any other comments or? Mr. Payne, what do you?
I don't see any reason to keep the public hearing open. I think we need to close it and move it to the agenda for next meeting.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Second.
Okay, any comments, any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We will be taking this up at the next meeting for action. Please, Mr. Vice Chairman, please read 3217.
Petition 32-17, special permit, section 3.2.1, church at 2434 Berlin Turnpike, Trans-Berlin Corporation, owner Mark Schabert, 35 Terrace Road, Weathersfield, Connecticut, applicant, contact.
Is the applicant here? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and make your presentation.
My name is Mark Schabert, and I live at 35 Terrace Road, Weathersfield. And I'm the pastor of Victory Baptist Church. We're a small congregation of about 16 people, and we are currently meeting in our homes, and we're looking for a place to be able to establish ourselves in a community. We all live within reasonable driving distance of Newington, and we think this would be an excellent place to be able to do that, so we've been looking. And we found this property in the retail center of the Trans-Berlin Corporation, and the space itself has not been occupied since 2010. Blockbuster was the last tenant that was a portion of the property, and so there's a need to be able to fill that, and then there's also a desire that we have to have a reasonable amount of open space to be able to conduct church-related activities, which includes having worship services, Bible studies, Sunday schools, and also to have a lunch on the grounds. We have normal services on Sundays and one evening service. And there could be an opportunity to do Bible studies in the evening in the future as well. The use of the space is the next slide here on the spot right there. The space itself is 3,000 square feet, and the overall building is about 42,000 square feet. And so we're limited to the number of people in the space based on the parking right now, which is 15 spaces that are allotted to it. And that would equate to 30 people. We anticipate that that number is sufficient for our needs that we have right now in the identifiable future. We are a Baptist church, and we are a traditional Baptist church. We're very conservative on our beliefs, and we believe that our responsibility is to preach the word and not to use gimmicks or ploys to be able to draw people in. So we don't use bounce houses or those kind of things about getting numbers. That's not our objective. Our objective is to be faithful to the Lord Jesus Christ in the teaching. So we don't expect rapid growth. It's all based on the Lord and providing there. And so we think this use is going to be applicable for us to specifically address the special criteria that is in section 5.26. The need for the proposed proposed location. So a church is allowable in all zones. And we think that the space here, with being a retail space, has adequate parking to meet our needs, as well as the open space. It's a one-story piece of space, so there's two egresses, so there's plenty of the ins and outs that we're looking for. And it's also in a very good location for us. And as I mentioned, the landlord also has been looking to lease this space as well to handle his needs. The other item here, the existing future probable character of the neighborhood in which the use is located. So it is a retail area off the Berlin Turnpike there. And so our usage of the space would not change that in any way, shape, or form. We're only planning on doing inside operations, nothing to the exterior, no changes. We would not hold anything outside. There would be no change to anyone looking other than the change of the sign on the outside of the building, which would be consistent with all the other signage on the other tenants that are there. The size, type, and location, the main accessory buildings. So that's there's 22 tenants or 22 spaces in the building, and it's 42,000 square feet for the overall building. There's adequate parking for this place here. Regarding traffic circulation on the site, there would be no change to that at all. Right now, as I mentioned, we have 16 members, and actually that only comprises of 2 to 3 cars right now. And the next one, the availability of public water and sewer, there'd be no change on any of the draw or the need or the deposit in that regard versus a retail tenant that would be in that space. Regarding signs, there'd be the same signage for this space as there would be for any other retail location in that building. So it would look no different other than just the name that's on the outside of the building. It'd be a same size, same shape. It'd be a backlit sign, nothing beyond our name that would be noticeable. And then as far as safeguards to protect adjacent property and the neighborhood in general from detriment, including not limited to buffering, we're not planning any changes to that just because it wouldn't be any different than any other tenant going in for retail. The only difference is what we're doing inside of the space itself. Regarding the adjacent tenants itself, we are planning on putting soundproofing walls in to make sure that there's no noise restrictions. And then the lease itself will also have very specific noise requirements associated with that so that we can, if there's any problems, that we would cease that related activity.
What are the hours of worship? Is it on the Sabbath? Is it a Sunday or a Saturday service?
Sunday services. We
Sunday
usually have
service.
2 services on Sunday, mid-morning and later morning, and then we usually have a lunch on the grounds where those that were there for the services would also eat together. We prepare the food off-site and bring it on-site. So typically, we were talking about having a refrigerator and a crock pot to plug in, a microwave, and just a simple kind of a potluck type of a format.
And your weekend, the weekday Bible service?
Normally on Wednesday evening, and it's, we usually hold it at 7 o'clock. So all of our hours are outside of normal business hours, and we're planning on putting provisions in the lease that if we would need to use it during normal business hours, we would have an agreement with the landlord if we would be going over certain space requirements or anything like that on the parking. Those details are being worked out, but that's the general direction we're going right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Planner, we have a letter from the owner of the property, Tom O'Neill. We just got it today, so we've had not a whole lot of time. It's very lengthy, and it goes into a whole litany of items related to the parking and the spaces and who's allotted what and so on and so forth. If you have...
Yeah, I apologize. That's me, Tom O'Neill.
You could come forward and state your name and try to explain what the...
I represent the owners of the property.
Okay.
I apologize for getting that to you at this late date today. I just read the application, and all I wanted to do was correct some items on the initial application that the pastor had filed. Wasn't his fault, it was really my fault. And one was the parking lot. When we paved last year, they were slanted. I didn't want to misrepresent anything. The original plan he had was the old plan we had. I just wanted to make you aware of that when we repaved and we striped, we slanted it, and that reduced that 3 parking spaces there. So it was really just to bring that up to what the current situation was with parking. It didn't change the spaces in any significant manner. I think there's actually still one more than is in the old plan, but that's what I was trying to do, just bring up things that I hadn't told the pastor, or when we first discussed it, that's what he had, and we hadn't gone over anything before he submitted that. So I didn't want to misrepresent anything. I wanted you to have all the facts there. And I know it was a late date, but my intent was to just show you the parking scheme as it exists today, that we feel there is adequate parking, and just to say, from our point of view, we feel it's a good fit for us, time frames and everything, and that we have protections that if he gets too big, we're both in agreement on this, and it doesn't work out, he'll find someplace that may be better suitable. But right now, we think for the size of his parish and for a growth, a modest growth, it'll work out good for us because it's off-peak hours. I know you don't consider those, but we think it won't cause a lot of traffic on the turnpike, and if he mushrooms and it becomes a huge parish, it won't won't work for both of us there, so the lease has provisions there that'll protect that.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
sorry, I didn't mean to.
No problem. Mr. Planner, does this site have adequate parking for this use?
Well, we knew that it did, the staff, we knew that it did before getting Mr. O'Neill's letter. Mr. O'Neill's letter seems to say that there still is adequate parking. It's up to the commission whether you want to keep the hearing open to give the staff time to review that letter carefully and then at the next meeting close the hearing and act on it. It's up to the commission.
Yeah, just to clarify, we want to we want to know that every tenant there is allotted so much space, and when you do the totals come out right. What the church has going for it is that we do take into consideration the hours of operation. What you have going for you is that it's on the times that their services are, there's very little, a lot of those businesses are not open, and so we do take that into consideration. So, but to make sure that we have a complete view of this whole application, we'll probably leave it open. You do your research, and we could close it next meeting and act on it on the next meeting anyway. You want to say something?
Thank you. Just to clarify that point, right now, the space was previously used as for retail, which the regulations required that the space, it would have 15 spaces allotted to it. So we're using the spaces that were allotted for the retail that already works with the existing piece with the property itself. So we're not asking for any additional spaces that were already being utilized for the retail use itself, just to clarify that for the record.
We just want to make sure that when they did the restriping, that we just want to have the staff take a real quick look. We're not hampering any time restraints because you weren't getting an approval or a denial tonight anyway. We're going to push it off. We push it to the next meeting so that we could discuss it. But at the next meeting, if everything is all right, we would probably move it and take action at the next meeting because this is not
at that meeting.
At that meeting, so we won't be stretching you out longer than you have to be.
Thank you very much.
But this will give us the opportunity to make sure that everybody is satisfied that it's above board and the parking works and everything, which we have a feeling that it does, particularly because of the hours of operation.
Understood, and
Okay.
excited to do that. Thank you.
I'll open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Anyone in opposition to this application, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll open the commissioners. Is it agreeable to keep the hearing open till the next meeting, that the staff come back and tell us that the parking is good, and then we could take action at the next meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Can you please read petition 3117?
Petition 3117, zone change R12 to a BBT at 2391 Berlin Turnpike, 2391 Berlin Turnpike LLC, owner applicant John Formato, 17 Farmington Avenue, Plainville, Connecticut. Contact.
See, the applicant has his representative here. Please state your name and address for the record and make your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff. For the record, my name is Alan Bongiovanni. I'm a licensed land surveyor in the state of Connecticut with an office at 170 Payne Road here in Newington. I'm representing John Formato before you this evening for a parcel of land, a portion of a parcel of land that he purchased on Brockett Street, just east of the Berlin Turnpike, 2391 Berlin Turnpike. That is in an R12 zone. As I'm sure the commissioners are aware, the 2391 is a small old red house on the corner of Brockett and the Berlin Turnpike. There was a computer shop in there. There's a barber for years. The back portion of that property, as it currently exists, that 40-foot strip is shown on the plan, about 8,000 square feet, is in the R12 zone. About 10 years or so ago, Mr. Formato purchased the two houses to the west of that strip or this piece of property. it was also in the R12 zone. The commission saw fit to change the zone for commercial to develop the plaza that he has here now, which in effect left this little island or sliver of R12 land. Because the applicant, Mr. Formato, did not own it at the time, the commission chose not to address that zone change, assuming at some point in the future that they would do that. So here we are. We've got a parcel of property that has a rear portion of it, about a 40-foot strip, that is in an R12 zone. It is bounded on all sides by the BBT zone. So we are suggesting or requesting that you consider changing the zone of that 40-foot strip of land to the BBT zone so it's consistent with the surrounding land and it can be utilized.
Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, well, any commissioner remarks or comments at the time, Commissioner Claffey?
Is there anything, and maybe either you or Craig can answer this, is there anything on the horizon for this piece? Does it play a bigger role in needing to be changed for parking, for a what? I mean.
Yeah, it's the next item on the agenda, the site plan approval.
I want to make sure, I know that it.
Okay, this is a piece of property that in itself is non-developable as the way it stands now because it's an R12 zone.
It's only
And
8,000.
besides, it doesn't meet the square
put
footage
anything on there.
requirements or anything. So it's like a leftover piece. So either we change it or it just stays dormant.
Mud right now.
Okay, I'll open it up to the public and then we'll move forward. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward, state your name. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it up to the commission for any comments.
Mr. Chairman, do you
Yes.
think we could have the town planner dig up the minutes from that meeting?
The meeting which-
From 10 years ago when it was approved?
I do have them.
Were there any stipulations?
No, there was a discussion about why this got left behind, and at the time, the little lady who owned it basically said because they didn't offer me enough for it. Which doesn't explain why she couldn't have just said, but I want my zone changed also, but she just wasn't willing to participate. And she made her observation, and the commission didn't follow up on it.
I don't think it affects the zone change, but I'd like to, I'm curious on reading it. It may come in handy.
Commissioner Clapp.
If it's changed into the current size of it now, if it gets changed into the BT, can anything be done in that 40-foot by, it's like 20-foot wide? Can anything in the BT zone go there by itself?
No.
Well, it's not a parcel. It's not an individual lot. It's the western portion of the property.
Okay, are you going to, let me ask one
okay,
question,
go ahead.
maybe I can clarify it. Is this going to be combined into one piece of property? The plaza, this piece, and the house in the front?
It
It's
is our
gonna be-
intention, and the next application will show that.
Okay, so what they're going to do
Okay.
is try to merge this together. Now, you got to remember that the house that sits there now, or the
that-
business is all non-conforming, doesn't conform to today's regulations at all.
Oh,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
something
I
that we'll discuss under the next matter.
Okay, I just want to make sure that little piece, you couldn't put anything on it now
It's an L-shaped lot.
other than a, sausage cart. So no one could come in there and say, we can put you see it in bigger cities where you get that one person that stayed out, and then you come in, you got a 15-foot wide house.
But
for
it's not,
business.
but those examples that you're thinking of are cases where it's a lot of record. It's a skinny little matchstick lot of record. That's not the case here.
Okay, then
It's a
answer the
portion.
question.
The zone boundary is almost an imaginary line. It's not a property line.
It's a portion of the piece in the front. It's just the back portion of their property.
I mean,
When they
no
split,
disrespect to what we're talking about. How did that ever get through 10 years ago?
Well, that's exactly the lady who owned,
I
well,
guess I'm
oh,
just-
okay.
Because wouldn't you have a boundary? How
That's
do you
good.
have two different zonings on one piece of property?
well, that's what happened was the original piece on the Berlin Turnpike where the house was changed from residential to a
But
BT
did that
zone
not
at
have
some
a
point.
property
And they
line?
didn't change this specific sliver of land. Is that correct, Alan?
That's correct, and to go a little bit further back, everything that fronted on the Berlin Turnpike, those parcels had a BBT, a commercial zone. That strip of land is actually a lot in a subdivision that's probably 90 years old. And that was one of many lots, and everything was zoned residential.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it happened to be part of that piece, nobody cared. It was a lot in the subdivision, so they left it that way. Today, current zoning wouldn't allow that. Lots have to be bigger than that, in all zones.
Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, I get it.
Anyone else? Okay, how are we gonna handle this? Because under the next, under new business, we have the site plan approval.
Right, well, I think it's a,
Norma, should we close this, or?
well, I think under the circumstances with this one, I think, well, let me back up a minute. Commissioner Payne, you want the minutes from the previous meeting, or the 10 years ago. Do you want to keep the hearing open for this one? So that you can read those minutes, or I think I'd feel better about keeping the hearing open if you want to
The reason
information on the background.
I wanted the minutes was more for, it wasn't necessarily for the zone change. It was just for the history of the property, for the things that are coming in. I understand the zone change. I remember that these pieces, the other two pieces getting changed. It's up to the chairman and the other commissioners if they want to close it.
If you want the minutes and you want to read it, then you've got to keep the hearing open, because
It might
if there's any
influence you.
comments, you won't be able to have them as part of the public record, which we have to keep.
Right.
Let's keep it open then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so then, to get to the chairman's question, given that this is a relatively small zone change impacting relatively few people, I don't have any problem with the commission turning the page and discussing the site plan that the applicants have proposed for this land, which is still residential. So I have no objection to taking up the next application. Just obviously you can't act on the next application tonight.
Any objections to that?
The applicant
Alan?
has no application.
You know, normally before we used to hear them both at the same time, and
Understood. Yep, that's fine.
okay. So
we'll continue the public hearing.
we're going to leave the public hearing open, and we'll get into the new business portion.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, approval of minutes of August 30th.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any additions, corrections? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next item is new business, petition 3017, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yep, petition 30-17, site plan approval at 262 Brockett Street, 2391 Berlin Turnpike LLC, and John Formato, owner applicant John Formato, 17 Farmington Avenue, Plainville, Connecticut, contact.
Okay.
Again, good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Alan Bongiovanni, representing John Formato in the application before you and his various companies. Mr. Minor, if you could select the one that was the colored rendering, I think it was one of the first two drawings, new site plan maybe? That's the original. This is, maybe we can stop there for a second. This is the site plan. This is the same rendering we used in 2006 when we were before you to receive permission to have this approved. This building, parking, buffering, that you see on the plan is what exists in the field today. Now if we can go to the next one. Thank you.
Blow it up again.
This is 2391 Berlin Turnpike and 262 Brockett Street combined. 262 is the existing plaza that's there. What we're proposing to do, Mr. Formato purchased 2391 Berlin Turnpike, is to merge the parcels. So now we have one larger parcel. We eliminate setbacks in between the individual parcels, things like that, and we develop it as one common parcel. That allows for an expansion of 1,800 square foot to the existing plaza building, and then a wholesale renovation in addition to the existing house structure at 2391. The 2391, it has about 1,100 square feet of usable space. The addition proposed is going to be about 700 square feet. As we're going to have to continue this hearing, we will have the architect here at the next meeting with colored renderings to present to the commission to talk about the architecture of the building, but it's going to be a similar design so that it looks like one plaza for the front building as well as the back. This site, in combining the parcels together, allows us to increase the parking for the property. The existing uses in the existing plaza, one are Mr. Formato's hair salon, which has a big following and a lot of employees. So parking is an issue for them. In the typical, as approved layout, they find there's times when they're short on parking. So by merging the properties, it allows him to increase the parking from what it is today.
You have calculations on the parking with the square footages
I
and
do.
the uses?
I do. On sheet 3 of 7 of our plan, I have the parking schedule for 262 Brockett Street, for 2391 Berlin Turnpike, and there is such. The parking requirements for 262 Brockett Street is 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. The proposed building will become, it is now 7275, will become 9,075 square feet, requiring 46 parking spaces. We're going to be able to accomplish 54 parking spaces on that portion of the site to service the main or the rear building. For the 2391 Berlin Turnpike building, the existing red house, if you will, after renovation and reconstruction, again, 5 spaces per 1,000 required. We're going to have a gross floor area of 1,728 square feet, which requires 9 spaces. As proposed, there's half a dozen space, or it'll propose will have 11 spaces. There's 6 spaces that exist in the front of the building. They're on Mr. Formato's property, but they are in front of the building. There is no green space on this property in front of the building. And then we would have 5 spaces to the rear. It's an existing paved parking lot with an existing curb cut. We would just reconfigure it to accommodate the layout that we've shown here. The site is serviced by MDC Sewer and Water. It will be continued to be serviced by MDC Sewer and Water. This is a unique area in the town of Newington for drainage purposes. This is actually a gravel bank. One of the few areas where we don't have hard pan ledge or heavy silty soils, where you can actually put stormwater back into the ground for groundwater recharge. That is how the existing facility site plan for or drainage system is for the plaza at 262 Brockett Street, and our proposal is to extend that drainage system, put more structures underground, so that can.
You want to go to that sheet?
No, that sheet's fine.
Okay.
It shows it well.
Not use it.
I'm just looking for a pointer.
My street too, so, no, it's not.
Okay. So that in this area here, the drainage flows from the north down to the south. This would become a rain garden, so it's going to capture any of the rainwater from the paved areas that we're creating into this area and allow it to percolate into the soil. So it's going to pre-treat the water, take out the pollutants, the hydrocarbons and such, and then allow that to percolate back into the ground and create groundwater recharge. Unfortunately, we received comments from the engineering consultant for the town this morning. I haven't even had a chance to thoroughly read them and digest them, so there's a lot of, I think, technical things that they're requesting, and computations and that we'll have to address over the next couple of weeks. But having said that, I wanted to explain our concept here. Site lighting is going to be an extension of what it currently exists. It's all fully shielded site lighting, so that you have no fugitive light trespassing across the neighbors or glaring into the Berlin Turnpike or the neighboring properties. Our landscaping plan done by Tom Linden, the landscape architect, continues some of the design and enhances it as you get further towards the Berlin Turnpike. If you're familiar with the site, Mr. Formato has done a really nice job with the property, maintains it very well, and is looking to further enhance that with the addition of this property as he works towards the Berlin Turnpike. This is a really nice opportunity for the town to take a small piece of property that's very hard to find somebody that can actually do something usable. I think this is a reasonable request, what he's proposing here, and I think it'll be a benefit for all the citizens of town. Having said that, we need to come back in a couple weeks. I can finish the presentation, talk about the architecture a little more then.
You want to just address for the commission the nonconformity? Because under today's regulations, we're not getting any of the setbacks or anything from the turnpike. You got the, I don't know, where's the property line? Is that the property line?
The property line
In
is
the
here.
front? Yeah, okay.
That's your property line, and your building setback line actually goes through the building.
Yeah, I see that. That's where I'm saying.
The proposal here is, as we know, it's an existing non-conforming, and it's allowed to exist.
Our responsibility is not to take a nonconformity and expand the nonconformity. Our mission is to correct nonconformities when they come in, or try to get them more into compliance than what they are.
And I think,
have you ever thought about that, knocking that building down and relocating it? Or putting a bigger addition on the other building?
A bigger addition on the other building doesn't really work too well in laying out the parking and all that. We've talked about that at great length, spent probably a year studying different options to try and make that work. We're leaving the nonconformities as far as setbacks as they are. We are not proposing to increase them in any way, shape, or form. One of the things we are improving here is lot size. It's undersized for the zone, so now this will become a conforming lot as far as area, where right now you have an individual parcel that's significantly substandard. So there are some benefits to getting closer to conformity with this plan and by combining the properties. But some of the benefits and the negative economic impact of removing this building would be a real hardship to the owner. And once you see the architecture of the building, I think it may lend a lot of credence to the proposal that's being presented. I will tell you the proposed use is one of its current tenants. It's an eyeglass place, so it's not a high traffic.
That was one of my other concerns was, we don't know who's going in there, so the parking could be impacted by what kind of a tenant it was. Already, at this point, the site without this it doesn't work with the parking. We know that because of the number of chairs and if you took the number of chairs inside on a full capacity with the number of people and the number of clients, you don't have enough parking just for the hair salon.
Right, and that's why, one of the reasons why he purchased this, so that he has, additional parking.
It'd be up to the commission to discuss, what they want to do as far as the nonconformity. But you know what our mission is as far as the commission is to try to bring these things more into conformity, but we understand also the restraints you have that work with, so we have to balance it.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Yes.
couple questions. Would this solve his off-site parking problem right now? Will he still need to park off-site?
That's the main reason.
Okay, hang on. Just to clarify what Mr. Payne is saying, that at some of the busier times during the day, they have permission to park over at the Mexican restaurant.
They do. They're good neighbors.
Yeah,
There's certain holidays and nights during the week that
They use,
Mexican
yeah, there's
restaurant.
crossed, which we don't condone or thing, we just allow it to happen so that he can conduct his business. Unfortunately, when this was approved, we didn't have the real conception as to how much business that salon was gonna do in the number of employees. You can't take it under, when we look at
It's
beauty
different.
salons now, we look at it with a different eye. We look at it from how many stations you got. You got 10 stations, you got 10 employees, you got to have 10 customers, and then you got people coming, waiting for those people to leave, so you could possibly have need 30 spaces, for 30 cars. So that's the way we look at it today. We didn't at that point. We took it on, I believe we took it under a square footage basis.
Right.
But, it has to work. It has to work for the owner of the property and for the business. I mean, they only hurt themselves when they don't have enough parking. Commissioner Claffey.
A question for our planner. An equally styled property currently is that Gateway down the other end of the Berlin Turnpike. How did they come up with their parking plan with all those different businesses and lots? Because it's almost like a mini Gateway, to the extent of you have Starbucks, the bank, the dental office, the Bellas.
How they did is they came and they asked for a
What was that-
waiver of the setback, which I talked about earlier.
Okay.
And the commission.
I just wasn't here then.
Yeah,
that's why
the
I
commission allowed them to reduce the 35-foot green space to 5 feet. That's how they were able to
No, I just-
accommodate.
But they also demolished the existing buildings. They had a
No,
clean,
it's
they had a
kinda
clean
like a
slate to
mini-
work with.
Where this is, we've got, close property lines, the buildings there, the curb cuts are there. We're trying to, in many respects, work with as much that exists as possible.
Okay, no, it was more of a question of just unaware how they
Commissioner
did it.
Payne.
Yeah, if the town planner could go back so we could see the whole site. Right there's good. But normally, when we have multiple buildings on one site and you join the properties together, we try to reduce the amount of driveways going in there. I noticed that the front building's going to have a separate entrance and exit, and you can't get from that building to the back building because of your landscaping.
Because of the parking.
Because of the parking. Well, shouldn't I'm wondering if that driveway that's closest to the Berlin Turnpike should be shut down, and you should be able to flow within the rest of your building.
We've designed and laid out scenarios just with that respect. That's one of the planner's early comments when we met preliminarily. One of the concerns Mr. Formato has, and the tenant, is that if it's all one parking space, you might see one connected parking lot. They're worried about the people filling up those spaces first closer to the street, and then the front building not having as much parking. So they're trying to keep a separate identity from a parking perspective there. Could we make it work with them? It's possible. I think we've come up with some reasonable scenarios. I think we'd lose a couple parking spaces, which is a big negative. The curb cuts all exist. We're not creating new curb cuts there.
No,
They all exist.
but we try to reduce them though.
Absolutely.
We try
Absolutely.
to, that's usually the theme,
This
is to
is a
reduce.
balancing act. This is trying to, make a lot of people happy at the same time, and there's some give and take here.
What about the rain garden, moving it over to the other corner on the west side?
Over to like this area here,
Right.
that would necessitate regrading all this parking area. That wouldn't, I don't think. be
Well, you could
practical.
still have a catch basin where your rain garden is and tie it
Oh,
in.
and bring it over there. Well, the idea is you want to take the surface water into the rain garden.
Right.
Rather than piping it over there. So I'm not
Hmm.
sure that, but, it doesn't have to be that shape. It could be
Probably gain
reconfigured.
half a dozen parking spaces, right?
I'm sorry,
Gain a half a dozen parking spaces
without the rain garden?
without it.
Every scenario where we tried to eliminate that curb cut, we lost at least 2 parking spaces.
Well, if you brought that down to the property line without the rain garden, and you put a curb so your front building had the same parking space you have now, that curb, you'd have parking space on the other side,
Oh, double
For the-
loaded.
double loaded.
Yes.
Just an idea.
Do you have an idea who's going into the addition at the salon building? Have any idea, or is it just?
He has a,
Yeah, as of now, I got a couple, letter of intents. What we're trying to do is put the eyeglass place in the front. I'm gonna take a little section of the eyeglass place, and then the Botox will merge on the other part of it. And they have 2 employees. There's one next, we have in our Southington location.
Was it doctor's office?
cosmetic.
Yeah.
Where are they gonna be in, which building are they gonna be in?
They'd be in the new addition.
New addition.
Over in this area here.
And part of it's gonna go back to the salon, so he's gonna expand the salon too.
For storage mostly, because I have no storage. I should have put a basement in the building, I never did.
Good, what the hell with the.
How big is that space?
The
2,000, 1,800?
1,800 square feet.
And how much is he gonna use for storage? How much is the space gonna be? Do you know? Yeah.
I don't have that personally, but we'll have a plan that'll show that when we come back with the
You
architect.
gotta be able to show us how you calculated the parking for this building and the other building.
Sure.
With the uses that he's intending. And if he's gonna use some for storage, then tell us that. And,
That helps him.
Absolutely.
Tell us that, and then we could eliminate some of the,
Yep.
you could use that in part of your calculations for the parking.
Certainly.
Question for the planner. On this plan here, those parking spaces that butt or diagonal to the Berlin Turnpike, wasn't there something recently where we discussed a buffer on parking in front of, was it,
Normally.
wasn't there something down at the other end again at the, what's that, not Hi-Fi Buys, that PC Richards and how many can face? Wasn't there like wouldn't they be in the setback of the pike?
Well, they're existing, so they're grandfathered.
You know,
No, there was, I swear there was something,
I know, but these are grandfathered.
I don't know, you're gonna back a car out on the Berlin Turnpike?
No, there's.
Doing it for how many decades?
There hasn't been a car in the front of that place for,
that's the whole problem is that
Well, that's what
front
I'm just-
building, basically. I mean, that, we're really not supposed to add additions to something that's not conforming. That's part of the problem.
I did that. Because there's really there's no line spaces currently on that, it's gravel almost and
No,
dirt.
it's
It is
paved, but it's,
paved. Okay,
it's,
I retract
it's-
that, but
they come in and they park
however.
horizontally, they park like this to the building.
And you have architectural drawings you're bringing in,
Yes.
Alan? Okay.
Yes. They were submitted, Greg has, but the architect couldn't make it this evening. We want to have the colored for a presentation.
You basically, you have the same situation where you would normally have a 35-foot green space in front of you. We're not getting that.
Okay, that was at the new place right up off Prospect, that you brought that up with the vet, and then they came before us and asked about that different parking for that front of that building. Was that what you're speaking of right now? That's what
Office.
Yes.
okay. So
All
that's where
along
it came from.
All
Okay, I
along
got
the
it.
Berlin Turnpike.
I got it.
We try to get the 35-foot green space, so we have the boulevard look for the
No, okay,
turnpike. That's what and we have gaps in that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have gaps because of this type of zoning, the zoning, these buildings that preceded zoning, basically, or
But
old
that's where my question came from, was that building and how they came back and asked for.
Normally, you would say, bring it more into conformity and by today's regulations. But at this point, it's a balancing act because of what you have there to work with. You got to consider, you have to keep that in mind when you look at these things, that, you get one bite at the apple too. And this is like, you approve this is like forever. This is what this is what you got. So you're never gonna gonna come back where you get that 35-foot green space, so. So, it's gotta be some give and take here, or this thing doesn't work at all.
And then, and it'll show any more green space that's added
Well,
Because
what
really, when
you
you look
see
at
is the proposed
when you
green
look at
space.
there two
Okay.
in the existing house, Alan, is there one tenant in there? Is there two tenants in there? Are they remain?
I don't know.
I don't even know if there's anybody in there to now. Is there?
Right now there's one. We used to be three. I'm not re-renting it because I'm trying to figure if we can.
Yeah.
Use, but
Yeah.
right now there's one.
So there's really only one tenant in the place?
And I'd never see cars there, so, I mean.
It used to be the barber shop.
There was a PC.
That was a
place.
package store years ago too, wasn't it?
Package store there, yes.
Yeah.
Always a package.
That's what it was originally, was the package store, you're right.
30 years ago, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
At least that.
And
Okay, how do we proceed, Mr. Planner?
Well, table technically is not the word because there's no motion on the floor, but just continue till the next meeting when the.
Okay, you have a lot of work to do, Alan, to
Absolutely.
bring back to us. You know what our concerns are, just
We'll work with the planner.
work
and
with
see
the
if we can,
planner and do the best you can and bring it to us, and we'll have to make a decision on what you bring us.
right here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
They'll melt away with it.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is old business. There is none, Mr. Planner.
Correct?
Petitions for public hearing scheduling?
None?
None. Town planners report?
None. No, I do have a report.
Did your homework?
We want to talk
Oh, we
about
do.
we want to talk, one
Yeah,
one of the areas we definitely want to talk about is the healthcare
Yes.
structures. We want to be able to do something with that.
Right, let me just go to the.
Oh, that hurt.
All right, as I said in my report, and I'll just read it. During the last legislative session, the Connecticut General Assembly passed a law that gives homeowners as of right permission to build a small detached house to be occupied by an ill or handicapped family member. See attached article from the Connecticut newsletter of the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association. Towns which do not want their residents to be able to do this may opt out, but that requires action by the TPC and the town council. We can discuss this at the meeting. And then in the agenda packet was a lot of the details on how it works. This Grandy Flat, this temporary health housing.
We have an
Thing.
opinion, we have some correspondence from the town attorney.
Well, yes, I know he sent an email stating that in his opinion, this is not a good thing and that the town should take advantage of its prerogative and go through the opt-out process. So we can certainly work on that.
And we have to have a public hearing for that, correct?
I don't know. This happened very quickly, so I'll come back next time with more
I think
information.
so.
But I know other towns have been going through the process, and I'm hearing the chatter on the planning listserv, and they're talking about other towns having hearings on it. So yes, I think a hearing
I
is
think it is,
required.
yeah.
Some of the requirements for this is pretty hefty on the part of the regulations, the way that they're set up. You know, they have to have a $50,000 bond, and if in the town attorney brings up that he feels in his, which is his opinion, that some of the language is not even legal because you're discriminating against people that are well, basically. So if you're well, you can't do this, but if you're sick, you could do this. So that he's hanging his hat saying that that's a constitutional type of could be a problem. But some of the other requirements under what I've read is it's very hard to do it anyway. And because of Newington, we have a bunch of smaller lots. We have R12, R7 lots. We have 50-foot lots. We have 8,000 square foot lots up, and then R7 and R12. The new regulations say that they're 12,000 square feet. Then you have the R20, which is 20,000 square feet. So, I mean, I don't even know if some of these lots could accommodate the additional.
That's right. The burden, the requirements are so high. It's such a difficult thing to be able to take advantage of, this new law. A lot of towns, a lot of my colleagues are saying it's never going to get used. People are not going to come up with a $50,000
They're
bond.
doing it already in West Hartford?
But when, I think I told you that a month or so ago, but since then, again, I've been following this on the planners listserv, and there are a lot of towns that are not counting on the regulation being so burdensome that people won't apply, and they're opting out to prevent someone who is willing to go through all the hurdles from being able to do that. So I can prepare something for your next meeting to take whatever the next step is.
Is there a time limit on this, or?
Well, you can do whatever you want, but
I
obviously.
don't want to miss out on a time limit if we want to try to opt out of it.
No, there's no deadline to do it. The town can decide to do that whenever it wants to.
We want to do it sooner than later and take action here one way or another. And if it requires action on behalf of the town council, we want to be able to send it to them in a timely manner so that they could do their due diligence and take a look at it. But we're making a recommendation if we wanted to opt out of it.
Okay, all right. I will.
Commissioner Sobieski.
Do that.
Yeah, I was glancing at this, and I believe I saw where it said it has to have its own water supply and sanitary system. You know, in Newington, I don't think you can get a well in anywhere. You know, certainly, you know, says its own sanitary supply, because if you hooked it into a house.
It has to be public sewer and water. So you couldn't do a well, you couldn't do a septic system.
Right.
Because public sewer and water is available on the street, that means they'd have to bring in a separate sewer and another
separate line,
separate
right.
water.
Separate electrical, separate gas.
Right, everything.
That's what I'm saying. It just doesn't make any sense.
How do you get to it? You'd have to have some kind of a driveway to get to it.
Yep,
Yeah.
for emergency vehicles to get to it.
You know, there's
And then you have to monitor the whole thing too, so that if that person happens to pass away, then they have to remove the facility.
It doesn't become a
That's
rental
what the
unit.
$50,000 bond is, so that the
Yep.
pod gets removed right away.
It's just a can of worms.
So what do these come off a truck and they just like a shed, basically? That's basically how it works.
Gravel base.
Would it have a foundation? Has to have a foundation, right,
Some
Anthony?
of them are monolithic slabs and they roll them right in.
Not if it's
drop them right out.
temporary. It wouldn't have a foundation.
You can have a foundation
Depending on the
part.
size, wouldn't
You
it?
can have pier foundation, you can unbolt it, lift it up and move it. It's like a trailer. You take the wheels off and then they bolt it with hurricane clips right to the ground. And it's bolted on like a piling.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, we'll have this on the agenda for next meetings, so we
Yes.
can discuss it.
Right.
In further
And
depth,
take action if
and then,
whatever that action
Yeah.
might be.
And you'll find out whether or not we need to have a public hearing, and then we'll know, so we can set it up.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Planner, under your report?
We already talked about the section 446, so we don't need to go into that again, and that's all I have.
You get you one of them granny pads, put it out in the parking lot and you can stay.
Okay, next item is communications. We asked at the last hearing, Mr. Planner, that you get in contact with the economic development people. Has that happened? Because I
No.
thought they were going to be here tonight.
Right. I have not had any communication with them on the sign issue.
Okay. Would you make sure that they get communications for the next, I believe it's going to be the next meeting, or some meeting in October, from the email that you sent me?
Right, and apparently they need, for whatever reason, to reschedule their October meeting, and for their reasons, they're meeting the same night as your meeting.
Okay,
So,
so-
but I'll make a point of talking to the chairman, the EDC chairman, before that.
Okay, so we just make sure that she's on board with it, and that she comes and recommend that Brecker comes too.
Okay, so could you clarify for me, because my impression was that the need that's not being served currently in Newington is the need that nonprofits have to be able to advertise their tag sale, their fundraiser, their event, whatever. And the town of Newington does have a couple of large community, I'll call them bulletin boards, but we used to have 3. One of them fell down, never got replaced. The other 2 are available, but for whatever reason, they don't seem to be used very much. That's the context that we're talking about here. We're not talking about signage for commercial businesses,
No,
but
this
the
is specifically
nonprofit
for
community groups.
nonprofits.
Got it.
We're
Okay.
trying to eliminate, like, the churches that have the tag sales, where they would not put out the signs all over town. A good example is the some of the other, like the Boy Scouts had a thing, they were all over town. The event is over, and I still see some of the, they never picked up all of the signs. So that's what we're trying to eliminate, so that we eliminate the yard sign, basically, and we say, here's 5 or 6 areas where you could go post a sign. And we'd have to go to the council, present it to the council, because there's gonna be some cost involved in putting up some kind of like a bulletin board or some kind of a board that they could post bills on. That's my interpretation. Do you have anyone see it differently than that?
I think
And we
that's
could
what you were
talk about, at
explaining.
that time, we could talk about, the Clem Lemire fence thing and some of these other things. Maybe you want to allow them to put stuff on the fence with some, I don't know. We have to try to get the signs off of the right-of-ways, the distractions, and get them into one central location.
Mr. Chairman, wasn't there a talk a couple of months ago, maybe more, about trying to ask for another bulletin board, like, so to speak, in the south end of town? We didn't have any down there. I thought there was something, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought there was something we were going to do.
We don't have one on the east side of the Berlin Turnpike. There's none over there.
No, we just have the one coming off the turnpike.
Yeah,
But I was just wondering, I remember that, and I don't know what, I think it fell through the cracks.
That's why we want to get the economic development, so that they can instruct Brecker to work with the town planner to come up with a blue map that shows the locations that we could possibly put these things, and plot them on the map, and then we'll take some, we'll look at them, we'll take some action, and we'll send it to the council and see what if they want to proceed with it or not. And if they don't, then we're going to still enforce the regulations, and we're going to have to come down on some of these nonprofits, and they're not going to be happy. At least we could go to them with this and say, okay, you can't put the signs out, the wire signs with the paper signs out on everybody's right-of-way, but you can do this. So we're giving them an alternative. We're not just saying you can't do it at all. We're trying to make everybody happy, and sometimes it's hard to do that.
No, I just seem to remember there was discussion on that. I couldn't remember. I thought we were talking on the Berlin Turnpike, northbound.
I think we talked about 4 or 5 different locations.
Right, I can't remember them
adding
all.
some.
That stuck in my mind.
Yeah, so this way, between Brecker and the planner, they could come up with something, and then we'll have the economic people. We're trying to, I want to get them involved, because I want them to do the legwork.
Right.
Okay, very good.
It could also come in handy for the businesses, so if the chamber wanted to do a special event for all the businesses, either in the center or on the Berlin Turnpike, and they wanted to have a special Newington Day for businesses, well, this gives them an opportunity to put signs up in 6, 7, 8 locations, in key locations, maybe coming in from Weathersfield, coming up the Turnpike from different directions. Maybe some of the locations, we might have to get permission from the private business owners, okay? But that is possible, and it would help the businesses and help the sign situation.
Good.
It doesn't even have to be where the signs are small signs. Someone could just come and say, well, I want to use the sign, and they can put up a bigger sign. I mean...
Right, I have some ideas
Yeah,
that I
okay.
can share with them.
You know what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to accomplish so that we don't go to them and say, we're taking away the signs, you can't put signs out, but we want to be able to say, you can't put signs out, but you could put them over here.
Right, good.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, actually, Commissioner Payne said Weathersfield. That reminded me. I just asked my colleague in Weathersfield what's happening with the cedar bark and mulch situation, and actually, they have been issued a citation, and technically, they are accruing $100 a day fines as we speak. So whether Weathersfield will follow through on that remains to be seen. But
What are they asking them to
cease and desist?
Holy smokes.
Right? All the stuff that they're doing
Is illegal.
is illegal, and they came to TPC to make it legal, which was the meeting I went to, but they never followed through on that. So that's the status on that item.
Any other communications or anything else you want to bring up?
No.
Okay, we'll open up to public. Anyone wishing to speak at this time, please come forward, state your name and address, please.
Rosines, 46 Elton Drive. I'm going to once again reference Administrative Letter 35 that gives some guidelines as to what the size and the design of the signs that are used in town on town property should look like. I know that I had contacted you and this commission regarding putting the EV signs on the Constitution Square the municipal parking lot signs. And I noticed that Parks and Rec has changed their signs, and it no longer says community events on it. And to me, it doesn't seem as though it conforms to what was supposed to be there. What I see advertised now is Newington Parks and Recreation most of the time. I thought the purpose of the sign being moved was so that you could see it from both sides. Once again, I said last time, either to you or to town council, I'm not saying anything to you that I wouldn't say right to them. But if you are going to have signs, in which I think has been talked about for many, many years, I know that the Joint Committee on Community Safety that goes way back to the Wright administration, when I went to those meetings, people came and wanted to know why the other side of the Berlin Turnpike was kind of like the black sheep of the family, because there's nothing over there to tell them what's going on. So it's just a suggestion, a thought, to make the signs uniform in the design and how they do them.
Have you gone to the council with this? Because you've come here several times with this
I can't
item.
remember.
Yeah,
I think I might have told economic development too, but I
okay, well,
think I
someone,
did say it.
this goes beyond what we can do. I mean, we can't regulate to the town. You
Who
know that the
regulates
town doesn't, the town is exempt from zoning. So I don't know what you want us to do. I don't know, is there something we could do, Mr. Planner, or what, am I missing something?
Well, maybe in the context of the community sign that you want to work on with,
I understand what she's talking about. That paper that you're referencing talks about the how those signs are going to look, and they're supposed to look colonial, and they're not supposed to be lit except maybe ground lit, and there were some other requirements on there. But Rose touches on something that's really important, and that is they changed the sign in the center of town across from the bank, and it affects the quality, I think, of the town. We used to have a name on there. It used to say community events, or it would say Newington with the town seal, and I think we lose a little bit of the town charm there by just having two poles, and the poles aren't even level. I mean, I don't understand it. The old sign was fine. There was nothing wrong with it.
Okay, well, maybe you should talk to the Parks and Rec. I don't know what we can do. What else can we do?
well,
I mean, the council is not stepping up to the plate to take care of what they're supposed to do. I don't know what we're supposed to do.
Well, if somebody tells me who makes the decision and who gave them permission to do a sign the way they want to do the sign, or if it's just any department
And who
can make
was
the
that?
sign any way they
No,
want.
she's asking, she doesn't know.
Oh,
I
no,
don't
we
know.
don't know.
But-
Okay, I understand.
Because last week
Okay.
it was talking about
Could've-
barbecue, this week it's talking park and rec. and
It's
next-
always got parking and rec
Every
on
like
it.
2 days it changes.
Yeah.
The one at the center of town, right, when you
Right.
come to the CVS, you look
oh,
at
that
it.
one? Okay,
That thing just keeps changing
that's
and changing.
supposed to be for community events. I mean, like community organizations.
But it's, like, to Commissioner Payne, it used to read like, had a little decorative top,
Very good.
detail
Oh, that's the
work.
sign we're talking about? Okay, that's wrong.
Said,
That's not,
It said
yeah.
community, whatever, Newington, and now it's
Somebody told me it
just
was done
plasters it.
in-house.
It's,
To me, that highway or somebody did the signs.
But there was nothing wrong with the top portion of that sign. Maybe if it needed a coat of paint, but it wasn't rotted. Maybe the poles might have been rotted, but I don't understand why and it was probably facilities, decided to take it down and not use the top portion of the sign again. I thought it added character, and it was, it addressed issues for that memorandum or
Right.
page 35, whatever you were,
Administrative letter 35.
administrative
which
letter.
Is from the town manager's office.
Yep.
And even in the center of town, I understood, I'm the one that asked, like I said, be careful of what you ask for. I asked Parks and Rec if they could do something about the sign that was there, because it was deteriorated. The
So-
tree was hanging over.
So this is all your fault.
It is.
Yeah.
I will admit to that. A lot of
With the
things in this
progress.
town are my fault. But
Ken.
town hall's not been renovated, that's my fault, ask Steve Woods. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that in the center of town, that, I think it was a beech tree or something was hanging over a quarter of the sign, so you couldn't read it, it was useless. So I asked if they could fix it up a little bit. Well, they fixed it up and they moved it forward and changed the design. I know you can't do anything, but if somebody can tell me who can, I'll be glad.
But that's all related.
I think
to that.
it's all,
Who do we send her to where she could get an answer? Because now I want to know I want to have her come back and tell us that she straightened it out.
Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec own those
Okay.
signs.
Go to Parks and Rec.
I've heard that Parks and Rec loves the signs and everybody's happy with them, and
There's your answer, I mean.
my answer. Thank you.
Quick question, because they're in the center of town, should we not try to keep, as Commissioner Payne says, a colonial aspect of them? And maybe what we should look at doing, and it's only a suggestion, kind of flying off here, but maybe what we should try to do is sit down with economic development and try to come up with some type of design just for those signs in that area.
That's why we're getting them involved with these, because this is the signs that we're talking about, is specifically that sign. So we're gonna have a sign company design a sign that we could approve to send to the council that this is gonna be the standard. And we'll probably go back to what
Was there?
what was there that Rose is talking about.
Because there's-
something decorative that looks like a colonial type or something nice, not just a plain piece of plywood painted white.
You might want to try to make the design so it looks not only pleasant to the eye in the center of town, but maybe put those out
That's what
in
we're
the
gonna do.
surrounding
We're gonna
areas.
standardize the
Right.
sign that we're gonna put in these different places. And we'll do all of that in conjunction with the economic development and then send it to the council and say, this is what we wanna do. These are the locations and these are the signs that we wanna have made and put up.
You know, that worked, I think it was about maybe 8 years ago, when the Economic Development Commission had appointed one of their members to do research and get it done.
Yeah.
That's how all those fairly new signs in the center got put up. So maybe they can do it again.
That's where we're gonna have the chairman here and we'll have Brecker here. So between Brecker and the town planner, we'll be able to get try to at least identify some locations and we'll try to move it forward.
Yep.
Maybe we could solve this problem through what we're trying to do, Rose. Okay, anyone else from the public wishing to speak at this time? Oh, seeing none, remarks by commissioners? Anything you want to bring up,
Just
Anthony?
real quick, for the planner, any updates on the Chick-fil-A site, the top of Cedar Mountain assisted living facility site, and any other things
Right.
that are, the
No.
site down by CLMP, the old CLMP site?
3333?
Yeah,
Right. Definitely nothing on the old CLMP site. Definitely nothing there.
I know they're cleaning it up, they're an environmental thing.
Right, yeah, they're cleaning it up probably to help market it.
Gotcha.
Yep. The other two sites you mentioned, the Chick-fil-A, they're still finishing up the plans, because as you know, they were approved with some conditions. It's taking them, for some reason, an awful long time to finish making those final changes so that I can then bring it to the chairman for his signature. The assisted living, I have not heard anything from them, so I don't know what's happening. They haven't come in for a building permit, so, but, no.
You know, we moved some of these items very quickly through our commission in the hopes that they would, you know, give them the impetus to start doing something, and then we find out, you know, they just sit on it. I thought that if I had an approval, came in and asked for approval and they gave it to me, I'd be out there digging the next day so that they wouldn't take it away.
I think they expected it to take a couple of months, and when they got it in a couple of weeks, they didn't know what to do with all that extra time.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mr. Planner, I think, like the Chick-fil-A, I think it's more legality that's holding them up to get those spaces and stuff.
Yeah, well, we want to see some action. I mean, we want to see that,
see
we
some
want to see
dig-
that
I wanna see
building
some
knocked
dirt.
down, and we want to, you know.
Want some chicken sandwiches?
That's right, and, we
yeah,
want to
you
see,
do. You
one of
want
the
some
things
progress.
that we should talk about is the mobile station. Maybe we got to send a letter to the DOT, because I understand it's the DOT that's holding them up because of some drainage
I
problem.
did get a letter.
Illegally tied into the DOT drainage. They didn't get a permit for it. That's the issue.
Right,
Okay,
and
so how do we resolve
they
that
got a
issue?
letter from DOT a couple of weeks ago. I got a copy of it. DOT told them what they needed to do. I don't remember what it was, but if the chairman likes, I can forward that letter to the chairman so that you'll know what's happening between the owners and
Because I
DOT.
get asked every week
I
from
actually-
somebody.
I do have on that mobile, do you have contact with those people who own it?
I don't, but I know Brecker and I know Mike D'Amato have talked to those
Can you
folks.
have the ZEO contact them to make sure they can lock that thing up? Because there's kids that walk through that site. I've seen.
I think they have a fence, they have a
I've
fence.
seen
up there.
You're right, there's a fence there, but it's a temporary. All it is sits on poles with sandbags.
Yeah. Oh,
The kids
that's-
walk through it public. No, but you know, we have they got two excavators in there. I mean, it's more of a
dangerous.
safe, it's not, I could walk next door to the police station, but if Mike D'Amato has the guy's phone number, he can make a phone call, like, hey, just make sure that,
Okay.
you know, it bodes well when, you know, I know it's really out of our purview, but he has action over there.
Okay, I'll talk to him.
Please, thank you.
Commissioner,
This seemed to be a hot topic. Last week, Carol Annis was here, and she asked Mike D'Amato about anonymous complaints. And I know Diana Sarah was talking to Mike about it tonight also. Is there something going on where we're all missing, that this isn't getting done, or?
No. Anonymous complaints get logged in just like any other complaint.
Okay, they seem to be hot on this, and
I don't know.
something's going on.
Not that I'm aware of.
a complaint that comes in, Mike, if they should treat it, if someone wants to give their name or they don't want to give their name, we still have to act on it, so.
We do.
So, I don't know what could be the problem with,
Right.
someone not giving their name. I mean, that's your right to, if you want to complain, you call the police department and say, hey, listen, I think there's a robbery next door. You don't have to give them your name.
That's right.
Your phone number.
Yeah.
Commissioner Payne?
Yeah, I was wondering if the zoning enforcement officer started his routine for doing sign enforcement yet?
His traveling through town?
Yep.
Yes, and in fact, I asked him today if he started doing that, and he said yes. And then we're across the hall, but we still email each other because sometimes it's just easier. And then I follow up with another email saying, next time you do, tell me that you did and what road you went on, so that when I get asked, I can answer.
Yep.
So, yeah.
It appears, Mr. Chairman, that the signs aren't getting, there's still quite a few of them out there. Until we get a handle on them, I was thinking that it would be a good idea to have the zoning enforcement officer report to us every 2 weeks, so that we could stay on top of it and we could hear what's going on with the procedure that he's doing. I mentioned this last meeting, so I was wondering if we could talk about that and see if it was something that the other commissioners thought was necessary so that we could get a handle on the enforcement.
Mr. Claffey?
I think it's needed. Just in my area, I live not far off Fenn Road. It was funny how after it gets approved last week, signs along Fenn Road, A-frames that are 5 feet tall, 4x8 sheets, a known company in town who's never had an issue in my close to 2 years living on that side of Newington. Thing just pops up. I'm like, how does this, I spend a lot of time in Newington. I work out of my house. So when I see them, I send them in as a TPZ commissioner. It just, hey, FYI, these signs are, and these aren't little mom and pop little Boy Scout things. These are known businesses in town with a lot of years here that they know better. And and
Maybe
one
they
of them
got-
was on the right of way and was back out today, and I just gave up trying to take a picture of it because it just is a, like Commissioner Sierra said, it's going to be an enforcement that's going to be the Achilles heel. But unfortunately, we're taking that burden, and it's no disrespect to you guys. Just I'd like more up to date than hey, we're looking at it.
Some, I gave Mike a list last week of maybe 6 or 7 different signs on the Berlin Turnpike, and some of them came down. But then there's some that they're still there. I don't know.
Or they're back.
Or they're back. The one that really gets me is that the Savers they got a Halloween's Here sign on the side of a tractor trailer. It's got to be 100 feet or 52 feet long and 10 feet high. I mean, I don't know why. How do we get rid of that? If they dig their heels in, I mean, I don't know if. See if he can. Maybe he got to stop in there.
Does he know about that one?
Yeah.
You just said okay.
Yeah.
How do we handle that? This is more of everybody here. In the past, when there's a business that has a sign violation for temporary, I'll use PC Richards because they come before us to get their tent permit once or twice a year. But then I drive by and I see they put up their PC Richard mattress sale temporary signs all along their business front. And, they come before us, they follow the procedure for that, and then we stamp that approval for that tent, and then 3 months later, they got violation. Is there any way to use that against the businesses when they don't want to comply?
In that example, I think so.
Okay.
I think you can just say no to the next time that they want their tent sale because
But we
they're
have to have it
documented.
on that, on that, that, okay, I just,
Yeah. Yes, in some limited
said
cases.
that very
Yes,
slow.
because it's very frustrating in town hall. Someone who has who's breaking the law in one area, but then comes in for a building permit, we still have to give them the building permit, even though they're a flagrant violator of something, except for taxes. If they're delinquent in their taxes, by state law, we can then withhold building permits. But they could be delinquent in $1,000 zoning citation fine, and yet we still have to approve their subdivision application because constitutional rights.
But there are
So it's-
ways to.
But yes, there are ways. Yeah.
I understand your answer.
I don't know. I think maybe the businesses or the public or got the impression that once we approve this, that it's like the Old West. They could do whatever they want. But we've got to stay on top of them, or else we're going to lose it. We'll lose the whole thing. I mean, when we see them, they got to come down, and he's got to get them down. Like he's got to, if they're in the right of way, just go there and take them. I mean, and if the ones like that, he's got to go in and talk to the people, say, you got to get that sign down. You got like 2 days. I mean, it can't permeate because other people see it, and it's a good example. They come in here tonight, O'Neill Plaza for, church and everything. We try to accommodate them, and on the weekends, the subway has flags flying out their subway, and they have open house little lawn signs, 6 or 7 lined up there every weekend. They're almost like the carpet store where when no one's looking, they put the flags out, and they never take the anchors out so they could put them out and pull them in. But we got to stay on top of them, or else we'll end up losing it. I mean, so if the commissioners want Mr. D'Amato here at every meeting, then that's something you'd have to decide that you want, and then we'll ask that it happen, and we make sure that we get him here and act on what his stuff at the beginning of the meeting, so you don't have to stay here all night long.
Okay.
I mean, it's twice a month. I mean, so if he comes here for an hour, then the next day come in an hour later, do whatever you got to do. I mean, his time is his time. So is that what the commission wants to do? You want to see him at least for the initial period with this new regulation?
I think that's what we discussed. I think that's what we discussed last week, until
Hanley?
we get
Yeah.
Commissioner Payne said, till we get a
Okay, why
handle
don't you,
on.
why don't you just tell them to come here, we'll put them on the agenda at the beginning. We'll do a quick, tell us what's going on real quick, and then go home, and then then Friday, take off a little earlier, do whatever you gotta do.
Okay.
At least until we get a handle on it.
Yeah, at least until we get a handle on what's
Right.
gonna happen with these new
Right.
things. Because I think someone's getting some bad information out there, and I don't know where it's coming from, that, we approved the sign regulations, so that's like everybody can just do whatever they want. And I was also thinking that maybe we should, that regulation isn't that long, that if you had something printed, I don't know, if we got no money, but if
Well,
we
he
had
did- He did that once before, where he printed the regulations and he handed out to them. So I think Mike does that.
Okay. But that's the way I would approach it, like the thing, I would say, listen, you got a sign violation, here's the new sign regulations, we want you to comply, and this will tell you how to comply. Because some people already put out the A-frames, but they got them in the wrong locations.
And they never got a permit.
And they never got a permit, so it's not a legal A-frame sign.
That's right.
Okay. Any other remarks by commissioners? No, I have no closing remarks. Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.